Hi there, Purple Girl here. Today I thought we would talk a little bit about seed packs and what information you can find on them. So seed packs come in a variety of different kind of formats, but most of them have some pretty basic information on them, especially if they come from a good reputable seed grower distributor. If you can't find the information on the seed pack, then usually if you go on that company's website, they will have the information there for you. Some of the, there's a variety of packs that have different looks to them. So here's just a few different companies here. And you can see they all look a little bit different. One here. So they all have a different kind of look. So sometimes you kind of have to do a good read over the package to find the information you want. This here is actually the back of the package with all the good information. This is the front. So let's start with this pack here. It contains all the information I would say probably that you're looking for on a seed pack. And this is kind of the basic seed pack that a lot of people, at least in my part of the world, are going to be finding at their local, big box store, grocery store. You can find these kind of seed packs almost anywhere. I'm here in Saskatchewan, Canada, and this is a very popular company for just having their seeds distributed through the stores. So obviously the very first thing you're going to find on here is the name of the product, right? Quite often you'll have the main, this is a radish, and then you'll have the variety of it down below. So this is a cherry bell radish. If you look down lower, you'll have the days to maturity, and this one says 20 to 25 days. We'll get into that a little bit more in a minute, but let's just keep looking at what else they have. Here it says heirloom variety. So that's just a variety that's been grown for many decades, and it's unchanging. It's a stable variety. You might also see open pollinated on your package, and that just means that the plant is pollinated amongst its own plants. So if you plant this variety of radish and let it go to seed, if it said open pollinated on it, then it would mean that you would get the exact same variety of radish out of those seeds if you harvested them and planted them again, because it's not going to mix with other radishes. Whereas some plants, if you plant them, they'll mix together and you'll get a whole new variety. That can be fun, but if you're looking for the exact same variety and you want to collect your own seeds, you want to find something that's open pollinated and or heirloom. This package, this brand here always gives you a little bit of information, just a little bit of extra information about the plant. Sometimes it'll give you when to start the seeds. Sometimes it'll just tell you something about this. So this one just tells you about the flavor of this variety of radish. But then down here, it'll have planting information like how long it's going to take to sprout, how deep to plant it, how far apart to put the seeds. So sometimes on a seed packet you'll see, well, most times on a good seed packet you're going to find something like a seed spacing, row spacing, and you might even have plant spacing, and you're wondering what the difference is between all of those. So that's when you're putting your seeds in, often they'll give you a seed spacing indication, and it might be closer together than what you want to grow the actual plant. So that's just in case some don't germinate or don't grow well for you. You'll have extras and you can thin them out. Row spacing is generally something that I ignore. I want to know what the distance between the plants is. Row spacing is to give you room to walk between the plants as they mature, and if you need to run like a tiller or something through there. So really, unless you're looking to be able to move between the plants, or like I said, get some sort of a small piece of machinery like a tiller in between them, you don't really need to worry about row spacing. If you're doing like square foot gardening or like raised bed gardening where you're going to put things probably a little bit closer together and just be reaching into the bed with your hands, then you just really want to be looking at the plant spacing and the seed spacing. So you'd plant your seeds at the seed spacing, and then as they grow and mature and get, you know, several true leaves, then you would thin them out to the plant spacing, and that's where you would be with that. Now this package doesn't have it, but quite often you will also find something that says a sell-by date on it. Sometimes it'll say use by, usually it's sell by with seeds, and that's just indicating when the seed seller has to sell those seeds by, and then they need to remove them from the shelves. It might also say packed on, and it's just going to give you a general date so you know how old those seeds are in a general sense. Most seeds will be viable for well past that date, but the further from that date that you get, the less germination, the lower the germination rate is going to be for that seed. So if you have a seed that's, you know, a year or two past that date, you might want to start sowing extra thickly, or you might want to do a germination test, which is just basically putting a little bit of seed on a damp paper towel, and then closing it up in like a plastic baggie, or, you know, put a low humidity dome or something over it, and just watch it for a few days and see how many of those seeds actually germinate for you compared to how many you put down. And then you'll have an idea of what your germination rate is. Some seeds will germinate well for many, many years, and others will lose their viability in that way. Some of them, it's not necessarily that they won't germinate, but things like pepper seeds, tomato seeds, some of those, they'll take longer to germinate. So the older the seed is, the longer it might take. And so we don't always want to just plant a pepper seed and wait 3 months to see if it's going to germinate. So we might want to just sow thicker, hoping that, you know, some of them will germinate faster for us. So some seeds, most seed packets will also give you some information about how to care for the seeds as they're germinating, and then also how to care for the plants. And so this one here tells you to keep the soil and the seeds moist until they germinate. And then it says to back off the watering and only to water the plants when they look droopy or limp. And that's just to give you the best care for that plant so that you can get the best, healthiest and best harvest out of the plants. You'll also usually find an indication of whether the plants, especially when you get into more ornamental things, I mean, most vegetable seeds are going to want to be grown in sun. So if it doesn't indicate on a vegetable packet, I would say you want to grow it in sun. But when you get into things like your more decorative, like flowers and that, they're also going to tell you things like if it's going to be in sun or shade, or part sun, part shade. Part sun, part shade are basically the same thing. So if it's saying to grow it in full sun, that's basically 8 hours of direct sun or more in a day. Shade is basically like 4 hours or less of direct sun, or it might be a heavily dappled area where you're getting some sun filtering through, say like a tree that doesn't have a dense canopy, so some sun is coming through, but you're not getting complete darkness underneath it. Part sun, part shade is usually around 6 hours, 4 to 6 hours of sunshine. And some plants will prefer it to be in the morning. Some will prefer it to be in the afternoon. A lot of times it'll say, like, if you're in a really hot area, to plant it in maybe morning sun or more shade. And if you're in a cooler area, you might need to plant it in maybe afternoon sun or less shade. So some plants just need those extra little finicky bits, and you need to read your packet and learn to know what you need from those. A lot of ornamentals will also have some sort of indication like this, which is, this one happens to have an A on it. That means this is an annual plant. Here, I don't know how well you can see that, but this says P, and that means it's a perennial. And some might have a B on it, and that's biennial. So an annual plant is one that's going to come up from seed in that year, grow the leaves, grow the flowers, set seed and die, and it does that all in 1 year. A perennial will do that, but then it will come back again from the roots. The roots won't die, even though the top of the plant may die. Some perennials will stay evergreen. In my area, most will die to the ground, but their roots are still good under the soil. And then those plants will come back up for you the next year, grow their leaves, grow their flowers. They'll set seed again. And then in the cold weather, when the frost hits, they'll die back to the ground and again come back the next year. So it's just a continuous cycle, and you'll have them for years. A biennial is a plant that you put the seed in the ground, it grows the leaves in the first year, and then the second year it'll die back in the fall to the roots, and then it comes back from the roots the second year with those leaves, and then it also puts out a flower stalk that year, sets seed and dies, and usually that's the end, and you have to reseed. So if you have biennial plants, you might want to do a sowing several years in a row, so that you will wind up having flowers every year, as some are just growing their base leaves, and then some will be in their second year and flowering, and they'll just kind of go through a cycle, and hopefully they'll drop seeds after a few years, and they'll just keep coming up, almost seeming like perennial for you. One thing you need to watch if you're in a really cold area like me, I'm in zone 3B here in Saskatchewan, so there are a lot of plants that say they're perennial, but they're not perennial here. So you may need to do some research to find out if it's actually perennial and hardy in your area. A lot of plants that we grow as bedding plants here are actually perennial and can be obnoxious weeds, just a few zones higher than us here. This seed packet is also just a little bit interesting. It has your sun requirements here. Now, instead of saying in words, it has just pictures. So it has a full sun picture, and then it has a picture with just a sun with just a little bit of cloud on it. So you want to kind of go from that 6 to 8 hours there. It's just saying you have a little bit of a range there. Also has a picture of a butterfly and a bee on it. So that's good to know. So this is a pollinator friendly plant. So that's one that I know I would want in my garden, because I like to have plants for the pollinators. Another symbol you might see sometimes is a deer with a cross through it, and that just means that it's not as palatable to deer. You might see it with a rabbit as well. That doesn't mean it's immune to being eaten by deer or rabbit or whatnot. It just means that those animals are probably going to go for other plants first before they start snacking on these. I found deer and rabbits and other herbivores will eat pretty much anything if there's nothing else there for them. So just don't think they're going to be completely immune when you see that. So something else that you'll tend to find more on your ornamental plants, your flowers, things like that, is going to be the size of the mature plant. You'll sometimes find that on vegetable packets, but it's not always going to be there. Whereas with these, they almost always will give you the mature size of the plant, at least the height, and then the width would be the spacing that they indicate for the plant, would be your basic width of your plant. So if you're planning out where to put them and plant them, that will give you that idea. Whereas vegetables, they don't always tell you, like they'll tell you spacing, but they won't tell you the height of the plant quite often. But you'll get that extra little tidbit of information with your flower plants. Something else that you might find, especially with specialty growers, this is from Stem's Flower Farm, and so they kind of specialize in cut flowers and plants that growers want for making bouquets and that. So it'll give you some extra information. Like this tells you whether or not you need to pinch the flower. Often they'll tell you when the best time to cut the flower is for saving for bouquets, so that you're getting the most vase life as you can out of the plant. So it's good to look and read through. This one with petunias will give you some extra information that you might not think about when planting. So it gives you the basic how to plant the seeds, But then sometimes you'll see things, especially again with flower seeds, where it'll tell you things like, on this particular package, it's going to tell you that after they've germinated at a certain temperature, you want to actually take that plant tray and put it somewhere cooler to grow on in a cooler area, and that's the best way to get the flower buds forming on your plants. If they're kept at too warm of a temperature, they might not form those flower buds as well. So that's something to know. Another thing a lot of flower plants will tell you is either to have them in complete darkness, like pansy packages, they'll say, you know, exclude light. And it's good to take something like a seed tray and put it over top of the pansy seedlings, like a dark one. Like, so if you had your seedlings in a tray like this, I like to just take a second tray and put it over top. And that way you're excluding the light, and you just need to check it every day. You need to make sure there's still the moisture in there, and you still want to make sure that there's no fungus or anything happening. And then you're also looking daily to make sure that they haven't sprouted and, you know, are sitting here languishing in the dark. Because once you have about, I'd say about 60 to 80% of the seeds sprouted, and they usually sprout really quickly, then you want to take that lid off and expose them to light, because obviously plants need light to grow, and seedlings especially. So just, that's what it means if it says to exclude light, and how you need to handle that. Now some seed packages will tell you that they need to be exposed to light, and so that's the complete opposite. So in that case, you want to make sure that you're just putting the seeds on the soil surface. You can give them a little gentle spray of water or a gentle pat with your hand, just to get them, make sure they have contact with the soil. And if you have really fine vermiculite, you can even put just a very fine layer of that on if you're used to using things like vermiculite. But you really don't want to cover those seedlings up, because they need the light to germinate, and they won't germinate, or you'll have very poor germination if they are covered up and not getting the light shining on them when you're trying to grow them. One last quick thing that I want to mention before I get back to that days to maturity is GMO. You might see your seed packages say that they are non-GMO seeds. I don't know if I have any that say that on them, but it doesn't matter, because in Canada and the US, I'm pretty sure, and I'm guessing probably most countries, or you can't sell like genetically modified seeds unless it's to like a large farm production where they're signing contracts, you know, very aware that it's genetically modified seed, and it's a very strict process. Seed growers can't sell seeds in these little packets to home gardeners like this for us to be growing in our gardens that are genetically modified. The companies that are genetically modified their seeds are going to keep really close track of the seeds. They're going to know who has their seeds and make sure that they're not being used in a way that they don't want them to be used, and they're not being resold without that company knowing. They've put a lot of work and effort into those genetically modified seeds. So you don't need to worry. You don't need to pick one brand over another because it says not like non-GMO. It doesn't matter. They're all non-GMO. So that's just a good thing to know. So let's get back to the days to maturity. Our black turtle beans here, they say 85 days. Let's see. My rosemary says 85 days. Again, oh yeah, my radishes said 20 to 25 days. So you're going to see something like that on there. It's giving you the days to maturity. That is a very confusing thing for a lot of gardeners, and with good reason. It's not clear. 85 days from when? 20 to 25 days from when? And what exactly does that mean? So here's the easiest rule of thumb that I'm going to give you, and it's still not a tried and true thing, is if you plant it from seed directly into your garden space, like things like radish that you would generally be direct sowing outside. Most people would be direct sowing their black turtle beans or any beans, their beans, outside directly into the soil. They're not starting them in small little trays indoors. And even if they are, it's probably just going to be for like a few days, get them germinated, and then they'll be planted out. Those, usually that's going to be the days on the package is your kind of general guide for your days to maturity. Plants like tomatoes and peppers, if they say 90 days to maturity, I'm not sure if there's any that quick, but if they say 90 days to maturity, that's generally saying from when you've planted it into the ground. And when you're planting into the ground, most people with something like a hot weather, like a tomato, a pepper, a melon, those are going to be plants that you're going to be starting inside. I don't know if I touched on that, but you know, they'll say like start like 8 to 10 weeks before your last frost date. So you want to be starting those inside, you know, in a protected space that's warm before you're going to be planting them in your garden. So you're going to take those seeds, you're going to plant them inside, you're going to grow them out for weeks, months, whatever it is, and then you're going to be taking that fully mature plant, well, no, not fully mature, you're going to be taking that seedling and you're going to be putting it out into your garden space. And the general rule of thumb is from that time when it's planted out, that's when you would start counting your days to maturity. Again, that's not an exact science in that. And also, depending on your conditions inside, some people will take it from when it gets like several true leaves inside and do it that way. Because you can plant them longer. I mean, we know in a cold season climate, we're going to be putting, like I have pansies growing right now in my house. They're going to be growing there. They were planted about a month earlier than the seed package said, because I'm trying to get them to mature sooner. And they're going to be inside a bit longer. And they're going to be in pretty good growing conditions for a pansy, and so they're probably going to hit that days to maturity. One thing that you need to keep in mind is that days to maturity is based on having ideal growing conditions, ideal sunshine, ideal nutrients in the soil, ideal moisture conditions, no pest problems. This is ideal conditions. And so most of our gardens aren't going to have that every day. So when it says 25 days to maturity, it might actually be 35 days to maturity. It just depends on your conditions in your yard and growing space. There's a really good video by Gardening in Canada, I believe is the channel name. I will try and link her video down below for you if you want to get into the really scientific nitty-gritty of the days to maturity. But I think as a general guide, for most gardeners, think about it as if you've direct sown the seed in your garden and it says 20 days to maturity, anywhere from that 20 days to probably 30 days is what you're going to get. If it's something that you're going to be starting early indoors, you want to be looking more at when you're getting pretty much a mature seedling. So you have several sets of true leaves, they're growing on healthy, they might still be inside. But as long as they don't shock when you transplant them, you're probably going to be able to start counting those days to maturity from, you know, like having about 4 sets of true leaves. A lot of us cool climate gardeners, we're trying to get those things like peppers and tomatoes and melons that are longer season crops going early. Now you have to keep in mind some of those plants don't want to transplant well. Like things like melons don't really like to be transplanted, so you have to give them extra care if you're going to be starting them early indoors and putting them out. Because if you put them out and they shock when you transplant them, which just means that it was too much of a change of conditions. You know, maybe the roots were disturbed more than they like, maybe the temperature range from day to nighttime, or the lighting was, you know, vastly different from what they were used to, the moisture was vastly different from what they're used to, that can actually set a plant down back like 2 weeks, and you're basically starting over from like 2 weeks earlier. So keep that in mind. Just trying to think if there's anything I missed here. I think I've got all the basics. A lot of it is just about reading it. Like some seeds will say to mist them every day. That's especially if it's a pelleted seed, that's just to, you know, make sure that it's breaking down that pelleted coating on the seed so that the seed can germinate. It's just, they have those special little instructions on them that I think if you read them, most of those kind of instructions, you might not know why you're doing it, but if you're doing what they're saying, you'll probably get the results you want. Other than that, it's just breaking down things like I said, that days to maturity it's a tough one. It's not a guaranteed mark it on your calendar, go out and harvest that day, days to maturity. Especially for those of us in colder climates or people who have shorter days. Hopefully that cleared up some of the mystery to the information that you find on your seed packs. Hopefully it didn't make it any more confusing for you. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this video, and if there's any other information that you see on your seed packs that either you're not sure about that I forgot to cover, or that I forgot to cover maybe, and you want to just share with other people, because that's a great place to learn from other gardeners, is down in the comments as well. So, you know, pop down there if you have anything else to say about this subject. And like I said, I will put a link, I'll put a link to my seed storage containers that I have here. They're really handy, I love them. But I'll also put a link, I'll try and find the link for the Gardening in Canada channel and the video that she has about that days to maturity, where it gets into the super scientific end of it, because that's what she does, is the science end of gardening. And I think it's probably more than what your average gardener needs, but some people like to know the science behind things like that, and she's a great source for that. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.